Evening, everyone. Again, I am Nefertiti Bowman, the Executive Director of Sola Contemporary here in Los Angeles in South LA. First, I want to thank all of the amazing artists who were a part of this show. Kindred Technology has been a wonderful catalyst that we launched and exhibited opening on Juneteenth, and the show will be closing this Saturday, August 7th. It has been an amazing 7 weeks. We have had some amazing individuals from all across the globe that have reached out to us and about this amazing work from these amazing artists. So just want to get started and just, tap right in. Slide, please. So I would like to introduce our artist and our amazing artist and curator of the show, Lenice Howard. So just a little bit about Lenice. Lenice is a visual artist who recently graduated from Otis College of Art and Design. She works mainly in paint and mixed media. Lenice was born in Southern California, and raised partially in New York State. Her earliest years were spent from El Centro, California to Los Angeles, California. The unique environments of California and New York have both shaped the way she sees the world. Her work is usually figurative and often narrative. There is a surrealistic quality to her work, as well as a spiritual feeling that is often embodied. Lenice is interested in many various topics, such as the esoteric, sacred geometry, ancient beliefs, the ancient belief system, the current digital world, as well as her experiences as a woman of color in today's climate. These phenomenons in her work have really embraced her recent works, which is the investigation on censorship and assimilation, lost narratives, and hidden histories. Lenice has shown in multiple exhibitions within the past 2 years and has won art prizes such as the Women's Painters West Award in 2019 and was a finalist in the 2019 AXA Art Prize. Thank you, Lenice, so much for this amazing opportunity in bringing Kindred Technology to SOLA, and would like you to take the floor now and just talk to us about this body of work and these artists.
Hi. So my idea for this show came about a year ago, and I got the opportunity to put together a show with SOLA. And SOLA is the first gallery that I've really shown with, and I had a solo show with them in 2018. And can everybody hear me fine? Yeah. I had a solo show with them in 2018, and it was just an amazing experience for like my first gallery show. And I wanted this to be an opportunity to kind of like a full circle moment to come back and bring these ideas that I've been thinking about. And they kind of relate to that earlier show, which was called Cycles of Time. This idea of how we go through these cyclical periods of time, and the past becomes the future and the future becomes the past. I started thinking about this ancient idea of time, and I was like, how can I branch that into a show with artists kind of tying into like our ancestry and like times before us. And so I started thinking of which artists work kind of resonated with that theme. And I was scouting you all and hoping that you guys agreed to be in the show. Because I was like, I don't know if they're gonna agree, but I'm so delighted that you guys all agreed to be in the show. And I see that in all of your work. I feel like all of your work in different ways kind of deals with ancestry, identity, ritual. And to me, this show was kind of like for the act of healing. And I was thinking about, Juneteenth and how it's a day to honor our ancestors. And I wanted to bring work together that would kind of be an offering to our ancestors in a way, or kind of giving back. And I started thinking about, us being like our ancestors' wildest dreams and how far we've come and how we often are honoring them with our work. And yeah, so I saw that in all of your work, and I really wanted to kind of put together this kind of multi-linear narrative that kind of deals with times before us, the times that we're living in now, and times beyond. So I think it came out great. I mean, you guys kind of blew me away. I was overjoyed when I saw the works, and you guys killed it. You know, after I was like, dang, I kind of want to be in the show. But you know, it was really good, and I'm just thankful that we all kind of were able to come together and do that. And you know, I'm really excited for the closing as well. So I guess we're gonna go into each artist, and I'm gonna send it over to Nefertiti. She's gonna introduce each artist and give them a chance to talk about their work. Oh, and a shameless plug. I guess I could do a shameless plug. So I'm currently right now getting ready for my solo show with Minnie Solomon in September, and having fun. And it's kind of a continuation of this, a similar narrative. So really excited, and you guys inspired me as well. I'm gonna give it to Nefertiti and let her take it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lenice. We really appreciate you. So we'll get started with our first artist, which is Alexandria. And slide, please. Yes. So a little bit about Alexandria Couch. She is a visual artist who recently graduated from the Myers School of Art with a bachelor's in fine art for both printmaking and painting. Her works utilize both traditional and found materials to emphasize an unearthing of identity through exploration. As a Black woman, her work is heavily driven by the sudden shifts of Black experiences from margins to center and the nuances presented in an ongoing battle of self-discovery, attempting to piece together identities in hypervisible environments. The work is both figurative and narrative in quality, and aims to facilitate states of dissonance between figures and their surroundings and provoke the apprehension of personal wayfinding. It also investigates the power to hold viewers' accountability in their consumption of the work. Recently, she has been investigating the narratives and historical elements of quilting in reference to lineage lost or retained by members of the African diaspora as a result of colonialism. During recent years, Alexandria has shown in multiple exhibitions, including the 2019 and 2020 AXA Art Prize and the Rose Sutton Gallery's presentation for the 154 New York. She will be venturing to Yale this fall to pursue her master's in fine arts. Congratulations on that amazing acceptance and going to Yale. So I'll pass it over to you, Alexandria. Thank you.
Hi, yeah, thank you for the introduction. When I was first thinking about work for this show, I will say, like, I don't think I've ever worked so hard on 3 pieces in my life. We had a very long period to create them, but I think a lot of these ideas had kind of been marinating for a while. And I wanted to pull out all of my stops because I really admired the group of people that I was showing with. And so I think in talking about, you know, honoring your ancestry and honoring your past for a lot of members of the African diaspora who don't necessarily have, you know, those core connections to, you know, coming from Africa. I think that one of the best ways I think about honoring the past and that history is through the present in my work. And so thinking a lot about found materials and pieces that I kind of hold dear, or ideas of historical traditional practices that are passed down to me from my family, like quilting, really serve as inspiration for pieces like this, and all of my pieces, actually. You can go to the next slide. Yep. So in a lot of my newer work, and I'll say that I definitely tried some new techniques that I wasn't as familiar with. So it was kind of like a Hail Mary toward the end. You have a lot of time to work on bodies of work, but I feel like deadlines kind of creep up on you, and you really want to do your best and, you know, put out all the stops. So I tried a lot of new techniques that were personally connected to this idea of like past ancestry, not only through like physical quilting, like in the previous piece, but in the layering and collaging of paper pieces. So if you've seen this piece in person, a lot of it is cut out pieces layered on top of each other to kind of get a quilted effect, even though the quilting isn't actually present. I work primarily on paper, which kind of just helps me in a way that's a bit more tactile and receptive to the mediums that I like to use. Next slide. I think there's one more. I think this ended up being one of my favorite pieces in particular. Thinking about, sorry, freezing up a little bit. Thinking about the idea of ways that we connect to our ancestry that aren't necessarily, I want to say visible or tangible. I think a lot about ancestry in terms of things that I see all around me, rather than having, you know, a physical record of something that's tying me to it. And so in this particular piece, I was thinking about, you know, how we dine with our ancestors, just by kind of glimpsing at the world that they built around us. I think a lot about how, you know, in Black history, much of the world, at least that America stands on, was, you know, built by resources, mined from Black land, built by, you know, Black people. And so you kind of look at these souls and ideas that have passed on, and you can still kind of hold this communion with them by taking in what's around you. And I think I was trying to channel that in a lot of the works.
Thank you so much, Alexandria. Awesome. This piece right here really struck a chord with a lot of people. So, you know, like, yeah, this was an amazing piece that was sold. And yeah, this one was one that really, really, really hit home for a lot of individuals who've come into the gallery. So thank you for that. And thank you for sparking that discussion and that conversation of dialogue with that. So we will move on to our next artist. Next slide, please. So Mr. Turner. So Kari Turner is an emerging artist from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Midwest. I'm from Chicago, so got to do a shameless plug. And a current MFA graduate student at Columbia University. Kari has his first solo show in New York, which is going on currently right now, consecutively with our show, at the Destiny Rose Sutton at the Ross Sutton Gallery, following his show in San Francisco, California, and presence at Christie's Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud, and the I-54 exhibition, also curated by Ross Sutton. He is a multiple collections. He's in multiple collections, including the alma mater, Austin Pay State University, where he received his BFA. He has been featured in Art News, Whiteout Magazine, Hyperallergenic, Juxtaposed Radio, and White Walls Magazine, to name a few. His early inspirations was his grandfather, who worked as a draftsman, drawing small images that Kari would recreate at an early age. Growing up in Milwaukee, his landscape consisted of vast nature and dense cityscapes, fighting against a city well known for its continued segregation. This created a relationship to Black people, water, and his environment that plays a major role in his work now. He currently takes water directly from different bodies of water, including the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, his hometown, Lake Michigan, and Milwaukee River water. He incorporates them into the work, either mixing the water with paint or pouring directly on the surface of the work. His aims are to eventually start work directly related to water health, environmental conservation, and bringing art to low-income neighborhoods. Thank you so much, Kari. Please take the floor.
Hey, that was good. Okay. Hey. How's everybody doing? I hope everybody's good. I really enjoyed this show. I was so glad when Lala brought up that when you came to me, it was like, you want to be a part of this? I was like, yes, I do. This is great. So I'm really excited about this show. I really loved everybody that was in it. I've already got a couple pieces from some of these people, so I see y'all. Thank y'all for having me. I really focused in a lot on this show as far as like experimentation, also exploring some of the ideas that I've already were focused on, and then also just incorporating a couple of different things. So essentially I already work with water, but I have recently acquired water from Senegal and Ghana, so that has now been put into the work in one way or another, in the same way that all the rest of my work has, especially with working on these black pieces of paper. So the way that the water works is I usually mix it with ink. So like thinking about me mixing water and an ink together and then putting it on black paper was already difficult. So I was like, okay, how do I do this? And I immediately came across a couple different problems, but the interesting part was how do I then make that a part of the work? So water became a part of the substrate in a different way than any other of the other works. And then in searching Bloom, it was really interesting because I was like thinking about how to make this flower on the side of the head really feel like the main part, and then the person was like the root of this, or like the beginning of this. I was thinking so much about past, and in one way or another I always considered everybody a part of their own family tree in one way or another. So like you being born is now the seed of a new family tree. So if that seed grew up, and like it would create some type of plant or some type of expenditure or another tree that it incorporates a new family. So like that's where I got this idea at. If you can go to the next slide. And so in thinking about all of that, and like plants have been like exploded into the work. I don't plants have just like come in and they like grow. And you see there's a plant behind me. Like I like live with plants. So like it just made sense that plants just came back into the work. And so this one was the same thing. Like another take on thinking about the way that if you have like a dress made out of flowers and it like came across the body, like how would those flowers interact with the space that this person inhabits? And then in this piece in particular, I like cut out the side of the face and then use this like transparent blue because I was thinking about the ocean, and I was also thinking about the water that's already in the work, but then thinking about like how much of that is not real. And what I mean by that is like these beings become spiritual the instance I put water onto them and then the water dries, because I work with that. I don't figure out how that happens. It just happens. And then I have to negotiate with the painting and what way do I kind of interact with that. And I'll mention this onto another painting, but on this one particular, like the water is clear, but it looks blue to us. So then like, what does that mean for it to be blue in the eyes that we think we're perceiving, even though it's clear? Like I collect water. So like I'm seeing it in a jug. I know it's clear. But to see blue ocean is like so ingrained in how we imagine water. Even though water is clear, like it's always blue. But I just kept thinking about that. And so in this one, I kept thinking about the connection between the way that transparency was happening and also this idea of blue. You can go on to the next one. This was so fun. I just love this piece. This is like the first one. I did this one before any of the other ones, and the way that these plants happen and the way that I was thinking about like a regrowth and rebirth and like these aspects of family trees and like this introduction into plants, it just felt right. The blue turban headband, the gold earrings, the accentuated lips, the thickness, and a lot of my work also, is about identity as well as connection to the past, but a connection to also everybody in one way or another. Essentially, everybody is made up of mostly water, 60 to 70%, depending on the studies, it could be higher than that. But everybody is made up of water. So to think that each one of us, regardless of sex, gender, age, anything, everything, we're all water to each other. Like if I took away all of this and thought about what the most of I was made up, it would be water. So every piece is always made up of water. So then the connection between the piece and the person, when you take out the eyes, is now from the body to the body and not from like a person to a person, because you're not looking at them, you're like trying to feel them. And because of that feeling, that creates the what I'm going for in the work. And so in this one, I wanted it to feel like you were in this jungle with this person, but you felt safe. Like everything around you felt beautiful and not like overwhelming, which was important because I feel like nature is it can be so scary, but at the same time, it can be so beautiful. In the same way that I feel like being a Black person in America is so beautiful, but it can also be very, very scary. And so like she lives in this. So there's no fear in living in this, and then you just live. And then to the next one. This is the last one. And this one was really special to me in a couple different reasons. So this piece alone is like huge. It's giant. It's supposed to be giant because I felt like this was like a goddess in one way or another, and like a real goddess. And so the name of it is Goddess of the Sea Looking for Her Children. So like thinking about all the spiritual aspects that go into the work, one thing that I always come back to that I'm gonna probably do work about later is that there were people who died in the Middle Passage, who died in the transatlantic slave trade in one way or another. And there was also pregnant women who died in that voyage. And so one of the ideas that I have, and one of the ideas that I keep coming back to, is that if the women who were thrown off or jumped off the boat had babies in the water, and the babies came out from water to water, then they wouldn't know the difference. And so if they grew up, they would be essentially mermaids in like one way or another. And so thinking about that is like a city or a whole nation of Black children who were born into water, becoming a part of that water and now living as this new thing, separate from either Africa or North America, but into a completely different atmosphere, and then being people of water, because they are like born into water, from water, and coming out the womb and then becoming something else. So like a lot of that is what I think about in the work, in terms of like how closely water relates to me as a person, already a body of water, but then to what that image would be if somebody that was my skin tone came up from the water as a mermaid and then greeted me as like a relative. Like how do I think about that, or how does that come about? And so essentially this would be one of those mermaids, or like one of the gods of the sea, like coming up and like looking out into the ocean to like connect to whoever's there. But either way, I say all that to say is that because this piece is so big, I had to make it on the floor and I had to like put it all together. But after I set the water on it and I let it dry and it finished, immediately after I finished that, and the piece kind of had its soul, because there's so much DNA and everything that happens in the water is always in the water. So like I'm just putting it on the surface and then it dries however. But after that happened, I realized like I'm gonna have to step on this work because it's so big. I can't just like reach the whole time. I have to step on it. But in me, it told me, the piece, it felt like, was like, you can't step on me with shoes. Like you can't step on me with socks. You can't step on me with shoes. So immediately as I'm walking up to this piece, I had to take off my shoes, take off my socks. I could not step on the ground around the piece, and I would just step onto the piece barefoot. And I felt like that was important because like there was a certain amount of respect the piece demanded that I give it, and that's just like period. Like I couldn't go around that. That's what it was. And so thinking about this show, I thought a lot about what that connection between me, the DNA that's happening in this water on this piece, and then the DNA in my body and what I'm giving it and what it's giving me back. But yeah, I was like super excited about the show because I didn't think about that as much until I did this piece. And so now I think about it all the time. So like really thank you for that, because I did not think of that. But yeah, that was it. I don't think there's anything else I need to say. I really enjoyed all of this work, and I definitely try to test myself in a lot of different ways. But yeah, that's it.
And for the latest information at
in progress.
Thank you so much, Kari. That was amazing. These pieces are amazing, beautiful bodies of work, and yes, we appreciate you and appreciate all that you do. So on to our next artist, Kwame Gomez. Kwame is a mixed media artist based in Akron, Ohio. Their body of work centers the creation of ancestral realms, figures, and and mythical universes. They compose futuristic settings where Black people are free to exist and rest in their own autonomy. Kwame is a recent graduate of Myers School of Art with a bachelor's in fine arts in painting and drawing. In their professional and undergraduate career, Kwame is a notable recipient of the National Scholastic Art and Writing American Visions Award, the Cleveland Institute of Art National 2D and 3D Juror Special Merit Award, and the Gillette Academic Senior Scholarship issued through the Myers Art School of Art. As of 2021, Kwame was recently admitted as a graduate student in the fine arts in the Masters of Fine Arts Painting and Drawing program at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Thank you so much, Kwame.
Hi, I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for having me in the show. I really respect and a lot of the artists that are in the show. I love Lenice, I love Kari, I love Alex. Alex is like one of my closest friends. And I love Martin as well. So like for me, this is just like a very surreal experience because it's kind of my first step into really like the art world. It's my first like show like ever in LA, and I just want to extend a huge thank you so much to Lenice and to Sola Contemporary for like really just like propelling me like into the next stage of my life. Thank you so much. So in my work, I explore ceremony and personal ritual, as well as ancestral veneration as a culmination of sensation, passion, intensity, and time. Through the language of collage and mixed media, I center the creation of ancestral realms, figures, and mystical universes in futuristic settings. So in these realms, shape-based mechanisms of abstraction unite with rhythmic expressions of dreamscape and fantasy in the pursuit of highlighting the sacred connections between Blackness, nature, and the figure as a pictorial vessel for ceremonial usage. In these sentimental domains, spaces are created where Black people can simply rest and exist in our own autonomy. Next slide, please. A Black figure sitting in close proximity with the viewer, laying in celebration with oneself and personal ceremony and processing in a deep slumber located in the center of a composition, to me, signifies the collective urgency of Black rest to reside in one's own self-determination and intricacy to simply be. Next slide, please. So in my work, materials such as glitter, cut paper, fabric, bead, gem, I use upcycled materials, I use upcycled jewelry, I use paper scraps, I use just about anything I can get my hands on. These adorn the figures and the spaces around them, signifying the intersections of identity, of origin, of narrative, place, fantasy, and belonging. Next slide, please. The use of hair in my work, for me, it signifies a tool of transmission. So transporting memories, experiences, knowledge, wisdom, energy, and truth so that nothing vital is ever forgotten, given from our ancestors. To me, hair signifies a extension of light force in itself. It has this muscle memory, to me, akin to a limb. This muscle memory of connection, connecting us to our ancestors and to those passing that knowledge and experience down to those after us. So for me, hair is like an ebb and flow between the future, the past, and the present. The culmination of materials that I use in my work, for me, speaks to the multi-dimensional nature of Blackness, how vast and expansive our mannerisms, our essence is across the diaspora. And so for me, taking elements of the outside world, found materials, and merging them with this dreamscape, with this fantasy world, is a type of world building that many Black artists, many Black people do just in our everyday lives. And pulling these two worlds together, letting them collide, for me, is signifying the creation of a new space, a new synthesized space where we can be ourselves as Black people. These alternate reflections of reality permeate through my work and I'm very honored to be a part of a show that speaks to ancestral veneration in such a strong way, and a part of artists who this isn't just like their art, it's something that they take with them every single day. It's a part of their everyday lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kwame. Thank you so much for your work. Next slide. So our final artist is Martin Etsom. Martin lives and works in Long Beach, is a contemporary artist making mixed media works using a myriad of techniques. Etsom's work unifies different source materials, mediums, formal qualities, and aesthetics and narratives to create works that defy classification and explore the world from both personal and social points of view. The work structure invites the viewer into different portals or realms of experience and narrative, where images collide and communicate ideas of aesthetic and conceptual complexity. Everyone has the opportunity to be the observer, the performer, the protagonist, and the work of art when they are reflected in each work's mirror. Thank you so much, Martin, for your work and for your time and being a part of this show. Give you the floor now, love.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Lenice for including me in this show. You guys are all such amazing artists. It's such a pleasure to be showing with all of you. Like when I went into the opening, it was just so much energy and there was so much work. And I loved how all you guys worked on paper and it was just straight on the wall, giving each work like a real physical quality that I really appreciate as a sculptor. You know, just truly beautiful. I'm very happy to be showing you guys and look forward to following you guys' very successful futures. So a lot of my work, my practice was sort of an exploration, and it started with me trying to find a way to give myself a structure and an architecture to the work. I'm very influenced and attracted to the different body types that have existed throughout history and my life. Starting with the earliest influences where my mom would keep books of Greek, Roman sculpture, and as well as Egyptian art historical books, which is really sort of the jump off of my work. As you can see, I incorporate different shapes, sizes, and body types, and signifiers of gender, things like that into the work. My work is very much based around my exploration of my own identity, being a mixed race and ethnicity person, which I think all of us are. You know, if we were to take a 23andMe or something like that, you all might come off as some stereotypical thing, but we're all very complex, and I'm very interested in exploring this complexity. So it was hard for me to tackle, like, how do I think about exploring like the complexity of like humanity and really the individuality of like our spectrums. But when I was finally able to come across, use these materials that aren't from traditional like art stores, or I was able to liberate myself sort of from the history of a lot of that, and really was trying to create my own narrative and path going forward that I could sort of claim as my own. So the architecture and the structure of these works is very important. Here we have Statuesque, and all of this work, fortunately, I was very grateful to fit into Lenice's vision. I had already made these works, which was great because I was working on a solo show in Santa Fe. So I sent her these images, which I felt of the work that I had already made, which I felt fit in. So this is Statuesque #1. This is one of my favorite pieces. This is the first time I was able to make a standalone sculpture. And I'm very interested in trying to get the viewer to perform and interact with the work. So I love that, it's double-sided, and there's 4 different images, technically 5 if you want to include the mirrors and your own reflection, which I very much do. So, and in each side or each plane is kind of like a portal into a world. So the images were a new thing that I started to introduce in the work to give the work more narrative, and I'm very and it allows me to explore like a myriad of themes. I'm very interested in hierarchy, beauty, the value systems, power. So this sort of structure in the work allows me to explore these like umbrella topics. And it allows me to just juxtapose things where I'm very interested in like what someone would gravitate to, and how these, putting these images together is like a collision of like time, space, history, all kinds of things where people, and then on top of your own image in the mirror, where it's really like I'm advocating that you take agency and hopefully take the opportunity to find meaning for yourself and come to conclusions for yourself. So it's very much exploration on my side, where I'm making the work in the studio, and then the exhibition process is a great opportunity for me to be sort of a fly on the wall, sit back, and I'm very interested to see how people interact with this work, because there are elements of that work which I hope encourages people to do so. Next slide, please. This is Amongst the Gods, #1. This is my first foray into Black and white. Also, these are all my portrait images of friends and family. Juxtaposed next to the Hercules is my brother. And then I've got a good basketball friend who's next to King Anticotin. And then my friend Athena is second from the right in the middle, and she's juxtaposed with Athena, which I loved because they both have the same name, but obviously in different time periods, which is very much what this work is about. And during this time, I was really thinking about I was protesting. There were a lot of things going on with human rights, racial rights. It really led me to think about what is sort of divinity, and what are bodies of value, who are the people we put on a pedestal, things like this. So I had these portraits, and I wanted to juxtapose them with, portraiture from historical like deities. And that's sort of what I did. And it was really an effort to collide those histories. And hopefully there's an understanding of that the divinity didn't stop. I think everyone is a god, a goddess, everyone is beautiful. And it's really alluding to this sort of shared space of inclusivity, and allowing a lot of different people who maybe have been neglected from certain art historical classifications or ideas of beauty, and bringing them into that. So that's what this work is really about. So a lot of juxtaposition in my work, a lot of bringing together different periods of time to explore and contemporize a lot of different themes. And that's really sort of the conclusion. I do have another slide, which I wish I had, this is not in the show, it's in the solo show I'm in currently, but along the lines of our ancestors, I became very interested in sort of the space and the land that we inhabited. A lot of that isn't our land anymore, but I became very interested in the space and where we take up space, how important it is to claim space, which is also very much why the mirror is there as well. At the end of the day, I hope to make works that really invite viewers in and acknowledge them. I think it's very important that people are seen. So the mirrors are very important in my work. It's not, and there's a lot of ways that can be interpreted, but I'm interested to see how people interact with it. And I'm very grateful again to be a part of this show, and thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much, Martin. I just want to thank all of you guys. I know that each and every one of you are currently in current shows right now. I know that Alexandria and Kwame are on a show right now here in Los Angeles, and just a lot of opportunities that you guys are currently in right now. And so just want to congratulate all of you guys for all the opportunities that you guys have had and within your work. I want to have us just have kind of like a little bit of dialogue. Lenice, if you want to tap in a little bit, we can just speak to some of those themes of identity, of transformative healing, of, kind of like that Black ancestral lens of where we are currently, where we were before, and where we are now. And then speaking to materials as well. And I really see the similarities, especially in the work with you, Alexandria and Kwame. You guys shared a studio space. A lot of your work is so beautiful, but so different, but you can see the similarities of being, Black women in this space of art and how all of that is coming together. Definitely want to take some time for Q&A as well from our audience, but Lenice, was there anything that we wanted to kind of specifically speak to and just kind of ask each of the artists kind of some of those tones of, things of identity, transformative healing, things of that nature, and just kind of, speak further to some of those things.
Yeah, so I kind of spoke on this a little bit earlier, and I mentioned this idea of learning, and this kind of definition of heuristic learning has been something that I've been really resonating with, and it's the process of learning as you go. And I think for a lot of us, that's how we're learning. That's how we're learning about our past. That's how we're learning about our present is, we're just learning as we go, and we're piecing together this puzzle as we go, and trying to forge a new space, trying to take up new space. Often in my work, I kind of tell myself I'm not creating reality, I'm creating an analogous world, something that's adjacent, this space of new possibility. And I think it's so important to create a space of new possibility, especially when you're looking back at the space that has been given to you and how that isn't really a space that is accommodating to you. So I often think about creating a new space through paint, and maybe that space can then transform into a real space. But first it has to be kind of believed, and then it can be achieved, so to speak. And so often in my work, I think of this analogous world as a space of new possibility and the space of healing, and kind of as a way to work out the healing, and kind of deal with trauma, letting go of ancestral trauma. And I definitely want to hear from the artists and how they think of their art as in relation to like ritual or healing, and how you may be dealing with trauma, or creating ways to continually kind of unpack all of that. So I guess I'm just gonna pass it to whoever else wants to talk.
I would definitely say that that is something that I found seeping its way into my work as of recently. For a very long time, I kind of would shut out my emotions in terms of processing trauma of any kind. And this was, I would say, beginning stages of undergrad. And I remember during one critique, I was talking with a person, and we were just talking about how it's like, it is okay to wear your heart out on your sleeve. And I kind of have this saying that's like, wear your heart out on your sleeve, but have a jacket over it. And not everything, you don't have to put out there, but there are some things that it is like truly like detrimental to your healing, to put out in like the open, at least for yourself. It doesn't have to be on a stage, but sometimes even admitting and accepting to yourself like certain things is like the jumpstart towards a healing process. And so I'd say in my work, I've noticed I've become a little bit more transparent, and that's only through like the help of viewing other Black artists being transparent. Because for me, for a very long time, it was like something that I just didn't allow myself to be. But once you see that it is a possibility, like you can be open with yourself first, and process trauma, and go back and think about all the times and experiences that you had. And one of the many ways I kind of get that out is actually writing poetry. So often the poetry comes first, the art comes second, in terms of like conceptual ideas. And so like for me, it's baby steps. But I'm really like happy you brought up that question, because I think it's something a lot of us are constantly thinking of, even in our current like political like climate, our current socioeconomic like state, like right now.
Yeah, I just wanted to bridge off of that idea of poetry, because actually this show started with a poem, which I'm going to recite at the closing, and it's called A Prayer for Healing. And then from there, I started thinking about this whole idea of kindred technology. And so, yeah, a lot of times I'll write, you know, down words and things that kind of comes to me intuitively, and I feel like it's like kind of the ancestors speaking to me. And then a lot of times I'm not even really aware of like the layers to what I may be writing. And then after going back to it many times, I'll start to re-examine and think of like, what is kind of the purpose of these feelings and these emotions. And I think like being an artist, we're always giving like so much of ourselves, but a lot of times we're not aware of that. We're not really aware of how much of our like soul is really being like spilled on in our work. And I think more so recently, I've kind of accepted that and like accepted this role as like, oh, maybe I can, you know, I can promote healing. Maybe I can help people to see themselves in ways that they haven't. What can I do? What is this purpose for me beyond just kind of, you know, my own personal goals, like more on a larger scale, and thinking of us as like a body of artists, a body of people, and like, why are we in this time that we're in? And you know, there's so many amazing artists of color, and like, this is really our time. Like, this is our time, like for real. So it's like, why are we in this time? We got to do something with this time. We got to take hold of this. And that's how I've been feeling recently. Like, okay, like, because I remember earlier on, about a year or two ago, I'm like, okay, I'm going to spoon feed them. I'm going to just give them a little bit of something here and there, because I felt like I had these ideas that were just so kind of beyond. And I think more so recently, I've been telling myself, like, no, like, just like, do it. Just don't wait. Just do it now. But yeah, so I wanted to ask Kari a question. What do you see your art? Do you see your artist ritual? Because I really thought of, when I thought of ritual, I really saw that with your work, and I saw, you know, you actually like pulling the water out of these bodies of water, and I thought about libation. I thought about also like, I really resonated with the idea of like bodies of water, and how we're literally walking around in bodies of water, and you know, the idea of like, you know, the connection with the, you know, the different the Atlantic slave trade, and how we, you know, our history is so connected to these large bodies of water, and how our ancestors' DNA actually, you know, blood was spilled on the way here. And are you thinking of that as well?
That's actually the main thing I'm thinking about. Like, the whole idea of the mermaid aspect was one part of it, but the real crazy part is like the slave trade transition, like how sharks move. Because of the blood that was spilled in the water, sharks move differently. And that, like, that's crazy, because if you think about like the migration of just a whole body of animals, it changed from just the way of how much blood was spilled into that water. But also, like, I'm in the same way of thinking about trauma. Like, there's so much trauma already embedded into the material by itself. I think the way that I think about trauma and the way that I think about healing is like, you don't get past trauma. Trauma is in our DNA in a way as well. Like, just so many studies about how trauma is like passed on. So it's not like just like a, oh yeah, you know, you just outgrow trauma. Like, nah, it's a part. Like you develop a way to negotiate how you deal with that trauma. And so in a way that I think about this work is that I know for a fact that there's trauma built into this water. However, the imagery is always going to be about luxury and about contemplation and about identity, but in a way where the trauma is there, but the trauma is not the centerpiece. The trauma is a confrontation with it, but understanding that just because this is a part of the conversation, that I live completely differently, and I want to live in a way that allows my ancestors to see me enjoy and in pleasure and in leisure. And so like, yeah, water and everything that involves the water is always a part of the work. And it's also always acknowledging that trauma, but it's also understanding that with this trauma that I will outweigh that by creating so much joy and so much pleasure and so much leisure, that this trauma is not the centerpiece of the work, but the trauma is the realization that I can live past that. In the same way that I feel like, you know, things that happen in our childhood and being able to go through therapy and like being able to think personally or internally, and then, you know, address that this happened, but that you can become a better person and bigger person from that past. And so like that's a lot of the way that I think about that work. So, and also I actually write poems too. I feel like everybody writes poems, but my poems actually end at the back of the work. So like I finish the work and then a poem happens. A lot of the titles are also like themed after different poems. I'm like really into poetry and also like spoken word. I just love it. But yeah. So it was so great hearing you say that.
Yeah, I'm just gonna bridge off of that, I guess. I mean, I agree with you. Yeah, we definitely deal with trauma and we hold trauma. And, you know, I guess I'm just like such an optimist. I'm like, we're so powerful. I feel like we can heal ourselves. You know, we can do that because we're magical. Like, I feel like we have that ability. It's not gonna be easy, and it's not easy. But we definitely, I feel like we can break these curses. We can break these generational curses. And I think most of our work has that brightness to it, has that kind of uplifting spirit. And that's another thing that resonated with when I saw all of your work, and I thought of you because, you know, I see a lot of Black artists out here, and it's a lot of sadness. And so I'm like, I want to see we're dealing with the sadness, we're dealing with the trauma, but how can we pull out of that? And I see the joy in all of your work. And I think that that's so important to celebrate that joy, because we do have so much moments of joy. And when I think of healing, I also think of us being connected to the earth, and the earth being so powerful and almost indestructible. You know, I often hear people say, you know, we're going to kill Mother Earth, but I think Mother Earth will kill us before we kill it, or before we kill her, them. You know, they will exist beyond us, because we are, you know, we are so minuscule compared to, like, it's like Mother Earth is giving us the chance to be one with her. But when it feels as though we become a parasite, it will eject us. And so, you know, we gotta understand, we're like, you know, we're a temporary resident here. You know, and she's a resident within the universe. I wanted to ask Martin a question, because I know that one of my like first shows or second show, I think it was around the same time I was at the show at Shola, was at Otis, and I saw your work there, and I've seen how much it has grown since then. And I remember when we first met, we kind of had like a little conversation, and I was asking a lot of questions about the work, and it was because I was curious about kind of this idea of identity and kind of, I guess, biracial, you know, reckoning in a way, coming to terms with your kind of like your your ethnicity. And I kind of have had a similar experience with, you know, one of my parents being biracial and not really at times understanding that, but which I think most Black people have this negotiation with themselves in general. And I wanted to ask you kind of a similar question in a way. Do you see that this kind of these as like altars in a way, like an altar piece, or do you see it as just an interaction with the viewer? But is there any part of it that you're kind of also reconciling with as well?
For sure. Well, for one, I definitely look at these as monuments because, you know, my earliest introduction to art is sort of that public sculpture made from and by ancient civilizations that sort of memorialized or something like that, their whatever deity or a very important person. So I think of my work in the same way. Essentially, when it comes down to thinking about what my art practice would, you know, center, one of the foundational pieces is sort of all my life and lived experiences. Like pretty much every stage of my life, I've been asked, like, what are you? Like what are you? Like my life has almost been governed by it. Navigating different circles, whatever new school I went to, new friends, new sports I played. So it's kind of been interesting from a very young age, having to say, oh, I'm Black and white, oh, I'm this and this, which is an interesting thing when I start to think about it as an artist too, because, you know, I really got into Afrofuturism and stuff like that because you can sort of play with those things and really start to experiment with the possibilities of like defining yourself, but also of a future. So very much so, like my work is very much about, you know, my mixed heritage. And then I just think I wanted to extend that outward because I think we're all dealing with like these dualities or pluralities. So much has been made of the genders that we're identifying as now. You know, in my work, I have a masculine side and a feminine side, sort of an ode to my parents. But I think these things are within all of us. You know, I think I have a sensuality that I've been blessed with that came from my mother, you know, and I've got, you know, paternal things that I think I've been blessed by my father with. And then, so very much so the work is about celebrating life. It's about creating sort of these monuments and celebration to like the diversity that we come from. And very much so they are at the same time, sort of, they're all self-portraits of myself that I hope extend like into the world to continue this sort of narrative and conversation about sort of our beautiful complexities.
Wow, yeah, I totally resonate with that. I recently have been painting a lot of men, and I think I've more so painted women more in like throughout my career. And recently I've been painting a lot of men, and I've been asking myself like, why have I been painting so many men? And I think I've been attracted to this idea or this kind of, I guess I feel this toxic masculinity environment in a way, and you know, trying to kind of reconcile with that or deal with that as a woman, you know, coming into contact with a lot of toxic men, and kind of wanting to dig deeper and, you know, understand the complexity of you know, what men are dealing with, I think. And I think men are becoming more open to becoming full human. I actually watched this podcast, and it was about how men haven't really been full human for so long. They haven't been able to identify with their sensual side or their more feminine aspects. And when you said that, I thought of that. I wanted to ask Alexandria a question about the kind of, because I kind of see your work changing in a way. And I wanted to ask you, like, do you see your work changing? Do you want your work to continually change, or like as far as the quilting aspect in your work, and how you are using a lot of kind of like, I see you using like more found objects or, you know, cut out objects. And yeah, I guess, how do you see your work continuing to change?
I definitely see it changing. I think my work is always in a constant state of flux. And I think that has to do with kind of a more personal idea that I feel like, due to like navigating my way through life in general, I'll say, but especially like our current political climate where we're kind of confronting all these things, you know, the idea of things like code switching or, you know, being multiple people, and kind of like Martin was saying, you know, negotiating between two identities, or figuring out how to navigate that. My work is always going through that same sort of flux that I am. I think I got a lot of questions in undergrad, like, you know, why don't you do self-portraiture? But I think that I am, in a way that my work changes with me. It changes with my trauma and my navigating through that and my healing. And so the newer work that's kind of being turned out is not only just out of interest in new materials and kind of getting to explore things in the short time I've had outside of an institution, but kind of having the time to get more in touch with letting that state of flux flow free, and not be so regimented, and kind of liberating myself from staying within what I think a painting or a print or a drawing or an art piece should be. And so, yeah, I've been getting back into quilting. I did a bit of it during undergrad, but kind of had to question whether this was like, it wasn't even my question. This is the funny thing. I got a lot of questions of whether it was too much of like a historical cliche, you know, to go with something like a quilt, or to really question why I was using a quilt as a mechanism for moving through a body of work. And so I kind of had to pull back and sit with that for a while. And so that's why we're seeing a lot of, I guess, past ideas manifest presently in this work. And I anticipate that my work will be changing again pretty soon. But I also think it's important to me right now that I don't lock myself in and kind of just allow these ideas to float freely. Because I think the way that we navigate through our practice as well is a part of that healing, you know, just as much as the conceptual dialogue that goes behind any particular piece. So yeah, it is changing. And I guess I'm happy to see the changes that are happening. I don't typically, I'm the type to really make work and like never look at it again. And this is sort of just a bad habit. I don't think I hung any of my work in my studio that I had made through the entirety of school until a teacher was like, why haven't you done that? And I was like, oh, I guess I should look at stuff that I made. And this is sort of a weird thing, but I kind of plow my way through a piece and work my way through whatever feelings, and I'm on to the next thing. But recently I've been kind of trying to pull that back together. And so a lot of ideas are manifesting at once, and we'll see where it goes.
Cool. Yeah, I you know, we showed at the XA together, and I just always have like followed you since then, and just you know, seeing how like before your earlier work was a lot like more, you know, with like drawing elements, and how it's got more into painting, and now there's more collage aesthetic. And yeah, it's good to see like we're constantly changing. I feel like we're like chameleons always. So yeah, I wanted to, I guess, give the floor to Nefertiti and see if anyone in the audience wants to ask any questions, or if anybody had any questions for me or whoever, just put it in the, I guess, chat box.
Yeah, you can either put it in the chat box, or you guys can turn on your screen or unmute yourself and ask your question. So we just want to open up the floor to our audience to ask any of the artists or our curator Lenice any questions if you guys have any. Unmute yourself. Peggy, unmute yourself.
Got it. Okay. For Alexandria. And this is coming from a lot of people that came into the gallery asking about your work and noticing that there was like multiple hands, arms, you know, the kind of ambiguous. It was kind of hard to read. And I just wondered where that came from, if it was just, you know, drawing it in perspective and then changing the perspective and just kind of a natural thing, or. Yeah.
That's a very good question. I feel like a lot of the time I forget to mention that, because I guess that's just how the lens through which I see things now, and not just because I have sort of poorly growing eyesight. But the idea of the multiple hands is kind of a nod to the idea of vulnerability. When I first started school, or, you know, studying art seriously, I noticed that there was this projection on to Black people, that they seem to be this very strong and impenetrable force of nature, that there essentially is very little to no vulnerability there. I think that people are, to say the least, more than a bit intimidated by Black people. And the whole idea of the multiple hands actually came out of, you know, personal events in my life, you know, watching my family members grow up and watching them get projected onto, you know, getting followed around in grocery stores and such. And kind of observing this idea that we're very intimidating people, but if you look closely at anyone, everyone has gestures, you know, nervous tics and such that kind of manifest if you're willing to sit long enough with who a person really is. And so the multiple gestures is kind of a nod to these nervous gestures and vulnerabilities that people naturally have. I think a lot of times we look at things like paintings and it's this, you know, end result polished thing, but I'm more interested in my paintings occupying a sort of in between. You know, you're not just seeing like a picture of something, you know, after an event has happened, but you're watching something happen within that painting in real time. You know, you're forced to greet something moving or greet this idea of a pause coming after action. And so that's where the idea of the multiple hands comes from. I always forget to put that in my artist statement too. So I'm really sorry.
Well, it's
to people who had to grapple.
It's a lot better coming from you and hearing the longer version of it. Thank you.
That's super amazing. Yeah, that was something that a lot of individuals coming into the gallery spoke about. And then just piggybacking off of that, going to your pieces, Kari, with this the emphasis on the noses and the mouths of each of the paintings, and wanting you to speak towards that when it comes to the people of color, Black people, and their mouth, their lips and their noses, and so how that is like, it's those are the first things that you go to, but it's so beautiful. And then when you combine it with the flowers and the colors and things of that nature. So just wanted you to kind of like elaborate more on that and those emphasis when it came to your pieces as well.
Yeah, so that was another one of those things where it was like talking about history and trauma, but then like navigating and reflipping it or reconverging it to something different. So in the original, when I started making work with those two features, it became a a quest for me to try to understand and like have a conversation around social justice and justice reform. And so there's statistics that say that people with wider noses, thicker lips, and darker skin get longer prison sentences in the United States, which makes sense because they put more Black bodies in prison in anyway. So essentially, you think the darker you are, the more you could be potentially sent to jail. So like it started off as that, and then I thought about it, and as I was making work about that, like it never got across the right way. Like Black people already know these statistics, so like who am I making work about trying to explain these statistics to? Like other people? And it's like, why am I trying to teach people about this? Like this shouldn't be the conversation. So like now what am I taking that as? Well, these are also both features that have been taught to us as like being unpleasurable or like disdained or like not, features that you should feel confident about. It's like, oh, your nose is wide and your lips are thick. Like, there's insults for days about just those two features. And so I knew that right then and there, like the work changed from this context of like, how do I address these negative things in the media and like put focus on them, to now going like, I need to be talking about how beautiful and how great these features are, while also then creating a conversation that can combine, multiple different people, which is great because some people will see my painting and immediately go, I know who that is. And then I'll get like 5 or 10, like I just finished a piece and like 3 women, like literally 3 different women randomly in different states was like, oh, that's me. I'm like, no, it's not. I made that person up. Like it's like 3 people put together, like the skin tone of somebody, the lips of somebody, the nose. No. This is me. Like you see my face and it looked like them. So like I can't say it. No, that's not true. But like essentially that's the thing about the work is like once you take out the eyes and allow that nose and that lip to be like really beautiful and prominent in the work, and like I painted so I was like lush. Like I want it to be as good as I possibly can do it. Like I got the skill enough to do it, like put it in there. It's like once it's there, you really focus in on it. Everything else is black and white. So like there's this the only color. So it pops out immediately. And to see that, and then to also see the images and usually like these dances or these motions or these like leans or like the graciousness of like a flower, it's always to just be able to say like, I don't know, these are beautiful, and you should I know that these are beautiful, and you understand that there's this past and you understand that there's all this history, but regardless of all of that, these are always going to be beautiful. And whatever anybody tells you, like, it does not matter, these are beautiful. And so you continue to keep having them. And so without the eyes, there's always this connection between the person and the work in a different way than if I was to give them eyes. And just because of that, then they really focus in on these 2 features. And so like saying that they're beautiful is like the most important part. There's a lot of other ideas that go into it, but like that's what I want people to feel when they come up to the work.
Thank you for that. That's amazing. That's exactly when I first visualized your work and saw it and was just going through with people and we were talking about it. That was what we, honed in on, was the beauty of it all. And, not having the eyes, not having those piercing eyes look at you as the person looking at the work and, digesting the work, and it made you think further, have more of a thought process of what that dialogue is and what the artist is trying to, what message you're trying to send. And so I appreciate that. And I thank you for that, to bring beauty to us, to bring beauty to people of color, to those things that we were told that was not okay, that was not great, that we should change and want to, alter in ourselves, when this is who we are, a beautiful culture. And so yeah, like I appreciate each and every one of you guys' work and what you guys have done and what you guys will continue to do into this healing process, because that's what your work is. It's all about healing, and your work is a form of therapy for us all. And I think that's where we need to go with that in this continued, place of change. This Kindred Technology, this show is about kinship. It's about community, how we were able to bring all of you guys together, and how your work speaks so well with each other, and how do we continue to move through that space and make that happen as we go through this world in this ever evolving change of trauma and coming through that. So I want to open the floor again if there's any other last minute questions before we say farewell to all you guys. Are there any other questions that any of our audience may have?
Well, I just wanted to say,
I think Martin had a question.
oh, has a question? Okay.
If no one from the audience doesn't have a question, I'd like to pose real quick as like an actual sculptor. It was so amazing. I said this earlier, how physical and sculptural all of your work was. And I love how it was just presented on the wall. I don't know if any of you want to talk to that, speak about that in your practice, just the physicality, yet it's, you know, on paper. I thought it was just really amazing, and it speaks to how strong each work is, you know, not having a frame and having it bam right on the wall, like boom, this is the work, this is it. Like I don't need a gorgeous frame, like this is beautiful enough. Like if you guys, if any of you want to speak to that, a lot of you are using a lot of different materials in this work too. And like I was looking at my work, like my work looks damn near flat compared to like all yours. I was like, so like just a testament to what you guys are doing if you want to speak to that.
I first off say like looking at your work in person was actually really surreal, because I like looking at like the mirror like alongside both of the planes of the images that you have was like, it's one of those things like you truly have to be there to see it and fully experience that. But going in terms of mixed media and like just having free form things on the wall, it's interesting because going through academia, there are certain ways that you're kind of taught how to make work. And I noticed as soon as I like graduated, I like so many doors opened in terms of how I allowed myself to like just navigate creating anything. And so for me, I will like see my works as invading a space. Things are, I think I have things that are like rectangle box, like, but I do have things that are free forming, that are different shapes and different ways of creating a space and like forming a space around a figure and around the viewer. And like in the studio, we're kind of like, well, when we were in the studio together, me and Alex were kind of like going through and like we would be sharing like materials and like scraps and things like that, and just like kind of building our own realities and our own like futures in that way. Material is something that's very important to me, and it's like seeing other artists value it just as much and like pushing past those traditional views of making work is very inspiring to me. It's like you don't know it's possible till you see somebody else do it, honestly.
Yeah. no, I'm just playing. But yeah, no, I think that material is so important because I do sculpture. I just don't have a lot of sculpture because sculpture is hard to like keep. And you gotta figure out a place to put it. It's like it takes up so much space. Like I can stack these paintings, but as soon as I start sculpture, it's taking up the whole room. So like in thinking about sculpture, material always comes first because it's like, you know, that's so much of the idea of sculpture is like what's happening here and like why is it built this way or why is it made this way, and like how do you function around it, because it's like you got to think three-dimensionally regardless. Even if there's sculpture on the wall, there's a point where like a person will look on the side and look on the other side of it because they're like trying to figure out what's happening. And so I think about the paintings in the same way that I would look at those. It's like all of this material means something, and it's like, and all of these like shapes and like the shading of it is always trying to think about the way that people look around a painting, like because a lot of people will like try to figure out what they're looking at and how to navigate that space. Like no, yeah, I think about it all the time as like sculpture, just like a flat sculpture.
I'll like shortly add, I think like the tactile nature of something is very important to me. Like I like to be able to feel something with my eyes. Kwame got the luxury of going to see the exhibition in person and showed me all the pictures of your work in particular, Martin, when they got back. And I was so jealous that I wasn't one of those people experiencing it in person, because I think the experience of a piece is something that's equally important to its kind of tactility. The experience you have when you're looking at a piece, or the experience of you and the piece being in the same space. is very important. So I like working on paper because it's not framed and it's unboxed and it's just very raw and free formed. And again, it's kind of liberating from what they tell you a painting is supposed to be. We had this whole, man, I was fighting for my life trying to work off of a stretcher during all of undergrad. And when I left, it was kind of just like, finally you get to work in the way that you want to, and it's really liberating. And so I think working, without a frame and without a stretcher, and I do work on the stretcher sometimes, but I think it's a really liberating thing to be able to do that. Not just the end product, but the act of making it. Kwame and I did share a studio up until very recently, since we're both moving to different states for school and whatnot. But we had I often think about the mound of, honestly, we had a grand mound of trash/treasure growing in there. Just little bits and pieces of, and cuts of old work and stuff that we collaged into both of our pieces. And so just the act of sharing that space and sharing tactile things was really important, and kind of became integrated into my practice without knowing it, just from sharing space with other people. So yeah, I think that was a good question.
Lenice, did you want to tap in real quick before we close out?
Yeah, I just was gonna say how lucky the next generation is coming up, seeing these images of Blackness and knowing that their Blackness is beautiful. I think every Black person, especially Black women, I remember growing up hating my lips, hating certain features. Now I'm wishing my lips was bigger. And I think, I just think about the babies that are coming up and how lucky they are to see all these different images and these models of their older selves. And I just think that that's just so beautiful. So I feel like all of your work is doing that and giving back those gifts. And that's something that's really priceless, honestly.
Mm. No, yes, definitely. All of your work is unmatched. And as I have told each and every one of the individuals in our audience who have come into the gallery, this has been an amazing show. I thank you all coming in Thursday through Saturday, walking through these doors, being able to just be with this work on a weekly basis for these last 6 weeks has been, monumentally just really has opened up my lens, as someone who runs a gallery, has opened up the lens of just so many, and having these open dialogues, because that's what this work does. It allows you to speak. It allows you to have these conversations. They may be uncomfortable, but then I think that uncomfortability provides nuances to move forward, as Lenice said, for the next generation, so they can be comfortable in having these conversations. And yeah, just continue to support you guys in your career moving forward. And we just want to stay connected, community, this kinship, and just the evolution of this technology, of art, of what we're doing, of materials, and just of love and just healing for us all. So just want to thank you guys all again for being a part of the show, and want to let everybody know the closing is going to be this Saturday from 11 to 4 p.m. We're going to have a closing reception where Lenice will perform her amazing spoken word piece in closing to this beautiful show. And so, yeah, so thank you guys. Thank you so much. We will definitely be in touch with you. And I am just so excited that, so much of you guys' work has been sold and will now have forever homes. And just thank you guys, and want you guys to continue just your growth. And I will be following you. And thank you guys again.
Yeah, and I just want to say again, thank you for all agreeing to being part of the show. I see you all as my peers, yeah. And we're all coming from the same generation coming up, and I look up to all of you. I'm always delighted when I see your work on my timeline and see what you're doing. I'm so proud of all of you, and we're gonna continue to kill it, period.
Yes, yes. Keep going. Yes, community moving through. Yes, awesome. So yeah, just congratulations to you guys all. Enjoy school, Alexandria and Kwame. Enjoy Yale and Chicago. And yeah, we will continue to tap in with you guys and yeah, keep it going. All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for being part of the talk. Bye.